They say every woman has a breaking point. Mine came on a cold Tuesday morning when I found my husband's letter on the kitchen counter beside an untouched cup of coffee. Nora, you were never meant for my world. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That was all. No signature. No explanation. Just the same cruel neatness that had always defined Daniel Hale, my husband, my partner, my undoing. The house was still filled with the scent of the cedar wood he loved, the same one I had sanded myself when we built this place together. I stood in the center of our dream home, half mine by law, but never really mine in heart, and felt something inside me crumble. By evening, I knew the truth. He wasn't coming back. He'd emptied the joint account, sold his shares in our business, and vanished with his assistant, someone 10 years younger and endlessly impressed by his charm. When the news spread, pity came first, then gossip. People whispered, "Poor Nora. She gave up her career for him." And they were right. I had been one of the youngest female architects to win the National Sustainable Design Award at 27. I'd been designing eco-friendly homes before it became fashionable. Daniel had been my mentor, my greatest admirer, and then, eventually, the man who made me believe I didn't need to shine on my own. He used to say, "We're a team, Nora. You don't have to work. Just support me." And I believed him, until support meant silence. Now I was left with a foreclosure notice, a bank account that laughed at me, and a heart full of unfinished blueprints. That night, I packed what was left of my life into 2 suitcases. My degree. Now I was left with a foreclosure notice, a bank account that laughed at me, and sketches. A photo of my mother, and a small metal box that contained the compass she'd given me when I graduated. She'd said, "Wherever life takes you, find your north, Nora." For months, I wandered between couch rentals and cheap motels, applying for architectural jobs that wanted recent experience I didn't have. I washed dishes at a diner to survive, sketching designs on napkins during breaks. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, until the fire. The old cabin I was staying in, a temporary rental, caught fire one night due to faulty wiring. I escaped barefoot into the rain, watching flames devour the only roof I had left. My sketches, my laptop, my last safety net, gone. When the firefighters arrived, I was sitting on the curb, soaked and shivering. One of them, a kind woman named Ellie, handed me a blanket. "You okay, ma'am?" I laughed, hoarse, broken. Depends how you define okay. The next morning, I walked to the city park. I sat on a bench and watched pigeons fight over crumbs. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Some pain is too deep for tears. It burns quiet. That's when I saw the sign. Help wanted. Historic Building Restoration Volunteer Project. Small print below read, "Seeking architectural or design background preferred." I don't know what possessed me, but I went. The project was an old train station, abandoned for decades, now being turned into a community art center. They weren't offering pay, just food and experience. But when I saw the cracked pillars and moss-covered walls, something stirred inside me. The lead engineer, a gruff man named Ben, handed me gloves and said, "You know how to read blueprints?" "Better than most people read faces," I replied. He grinned. "Good. Then you're in charge of the West Wing." For weeks, I worked like a woman possessed. Days filled with dust, nights with sketches. Every nail I hammered, every beam I reinforced felt like stitching a wound closed inside myself. It was exhausting. It was healing. One evening, as the sun spilled amber light through the broken glass roof, Ben walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know, you could have fooled me," he said. "About what?" about being someone who lost everything. You work like a person who's just getting started. I smiled faintly. Maybe I am. He nodded toward the station. When this place opens again, people will see what we built. But I think for you, it's not about the building, is it? No, I said softly. It's about proving I still can. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. That night, as I stood under the stars, I realized something. Maybe the universe doesn't destroy us to be cruel. Maybe it burns away everything false so that when we rebuild, it's with truth, not illusion. And for the first time since Daniel's letter, I whispered, "Thank you." Not to him, but to the ruins. Because they'd finally made me remember who I was. Sometimes you have to lose everything that was never real to discover what you truly are. 3 months later, the old train station had turned into something else, a living, breathing testament to second chances. The walls were reborn, the ceilings kissed by light again. People began to gather every morning, watching volunteers transform what was once forgotten into something worth remembering. Word spread fast. The city press came to do a feature. They interviewed Ben, the engineers, and then me, the quiet woman in worn jeans, sketching at sunrise. "What's your role here?" the reporter asked. I hesitated, then said, "I build what people stopped believing in." The line made the headline. The woman who builds what others abandon. After that, donations poured in. The city council noticed. And one afternoon, a sleek car stopped outside the station. Out stepped Clara Reynolds, director of Lumen Design Group, one of the largest firms in the state. She approached, all sharp heels and confidence. "You're Nora Hale?" I nodded. "I saw your interview. You've got a rare eye for revival architecture. We've been searching for someone to lead a major restoration in Chicago. Would you be interested?" I almost laughed. "I don't have recent experience." "You rebuilt an entire station from scratch with no budget," she said, looking around. "That's more impressive than half the resumes on my desk." And just like that, the world shifted again. When I arrived in Chicago 2 weeks later, I didn't even own a proper coat. Clara gave me an office overlooking the river. The first day, I stood by the window, hands trembling slightly.
"This is yours," she said.
"Design the Hale building." I blinked. "You're naming it after me?" "After your spirit," she replied. "Every project deserves the soul of the person who rebuilds it." The building was an old textile factory, blackened by time. My job was to turn it into a cultural hub. I threw myself into it completely, sketching until dawn, meeting contractors, rewriting blueprints. But with success came shadows. One of the senior partners, Marcus Finn, didn't like me. He saw my rise as a threat. He'd smile politely in meetings, then undermine my work afterward. "You're too emotional in your designs," he said once, voice dripping with condescension. "Architecture isn't about feelings." I met his gaze steadily.
"No, Marcus.
"It's about meaning. And that's what you've forgotten." He smirked. "You'll learn." But I already had. Pain had been my teacher long before blueprints were. Weeks later, during a board presentation, Marcus did the unthinkable. He presented my designs, my exact concepts for the Hale building, as his own. The air went still. My heart slammed against my ribs. Clara looked confused. "Marcus, these are my team's concepts," he cut in quickly. Nora assisted. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the silence I'd carried through my marriage, or the years of being underestimated. But I stood up, voice steady as steel.
"No, Clara.
Those aren't his designs. They're mine. And if you check the metadata on the digital files, you'll see who created them." Marcus laughed coldly. "You're calling me a thief?" I met his eyes. No, Marcus. I'm calling you a coward. The room went dead quiet. Clara's assistant quickly checked the timestamps. Nora's right. She drafted the originals 3 weeks before Marcus's upload. Clara turned to him. You're done here. He stormed out, muttering something about arrogant women. After the meeting, Clara came over, placing a hand on my shoulder. You didn't just defend yourself, she said softly. You defended every woman who was ever told to stay quiet. I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. But inside, I felt something powerful shift, like the first light breaking through years of fog. A month later, the Hale building opened to the public. It wasn't just steel and glass, it was hope. Walls made of recycled bricks. Gardens on every terrace. Spaces that breathed light into the city. People came from across the country to see it. And when they did, they saw me. Reporters called me the Phoenix Architect. But I wasn't reborn. I'd simply stopped pretending to be ashes. That night, standing alone inside the completed building, I whispered, Mom, I found my north again. The world will try to steal your voice, your work, your worth. But once you've built yourself from ruin, no one can ever dismantle you again. 2 years later, I returned to my hometown, not as the woman who was left behind, but as the woman who had built herself from dust and blueprint dreams. The train station was now alive with laughter, art, and life. Children ran through its halls. My name was etched on a brass plaque near the entrance. Rebuilt with love by Nora Hale. Ben was there, older, smiling proudly. Didn't I tell you you'd go far? I hugged him. You did. And you were right. He looked around the busy station. So, what brings you home? I glanced up at the rafters, sunlight streaming through restored glass. A new project. I showed him a sketch, a design for affordable eco-homes for single mothers, inspired by the shelter I once slept in. I'm calling it the Foundation Project, I said, because everyone deserves a foundation strong enough to rebuild from. Ben's eyes softened. That's beautiful. It's necessary, I said. We build skyscrapers that touch the sky, but forget the people living beneath their shadows. As I spoke, I realized something deeper. Every broken piece of my past, every loss, betrayal, fire, had been part of a larger design. Not punishment, but preparation. Months later, at the groundbreaking ceremony, reporters gathered again. Someone asked, Nora, what's the secret to your success? I smiled faintly. Failure. Complete and total failure. They laughed, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. Failure strips away illusions. I continued. It forces you to build with truth. That's why I'm not afraid to start over. Because every time I do, I build stronger. Later that evening, as the sun melted behind the city skyline, I walked alone across the construction site. The wind carried dust and promise. In my hand, I held the same compass my mother gave me all those years ago. The needle trembled north again. And for the first time, I understood what she meant. North isn't a direction. It's a decision.
To rise.
To rebuild. To believe again. I wasn't Daniel's wife anymore. I wasn't the woman who lost everything. I wasn't even the woman who was burned and rebuilt. I was the architect of my own becoming. You can take everything from a woman, her money, her marriage, her safety, but you can never take away her ability to rebuild herself from the ruins. The woman who built herself. A story of loss, resilience, and rebirth. Because sometimes the most beautiful structures are not made of steel or stone, but of women who refuse to stay broken.